Good morning, church family. Pray all is well at your house today and that you have a wonderful, joyful day. Today we're working out of 2 Corinthians chapter 7 and give you a little background on what's happened to this point here. We know the 1 Corinthians letter was written to the church of Corinth because of immorality within the church that Paul had heard about, and also some forms of division in the church. So Paul sends Timothy back to Corinth to check on the Christians there, and he gets a report back through him or from another source that there's some false teachings going on within the church and so on, and they have assaulted the character of Paul. And Paul is very upset over that, and he leaves Ephesus and goes to Corinth, and this happens to be the painful visit. And the people are not loyal to Paul, and they insult him to his face, and he is quite upset over it, and he leaves and goes back to Ephesus. And he writes this letter here in 2 Corinthians, and in chapter 7 here it mentioned in verse 8 about the letter, and it's called the lost letter, the severe letter, and Paul really had a tough time writing it and regretted it, but he sent this letter with Timothy to take to Corinth. Now, Paul is in Ephesus, and he's preaching, and he is really have some anxiety and fear over what might happen as a result of this letter. And he gets very impatient, and he leaves Ephesus and goes to Troas hopefully to meet Titus and find out what went on there. Well, God opens the door in Troas for him, but he's still anxious, and he leaves there and goes to Macedonia thinking he's going to meet up with Titus, in which he does. And this is chapter 7 here tells what the results are of Titus's findings. And he starts out talking about sin here in the very first verse. And this is like Brother Josh preached yesterday about the filthiness of the flesh and spirit in our lives there. And it says that we are to cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and the spirit. Of course, of the flesh would be the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes. And then we find the spirit is much like the Sadducees and Pharisees. They had pride, legalism, self-righteousness, self-focus. And if you don't agree with it, it led to bitterness and hatred for you. So then we go on and see, here's where Paul said, nevertheless, God who comforts the downcast comforted us by the coming of Titus. And Titus brings a very good report to him. He said, Titus tells Paul that they have earnestly desire the word that he has preached, and that they were mourning and they had a zeal for Paul. And this just brought such joy to Paul that he starts out in verse 8 saying, for even if I made you sorry with my letter, I do not regret it, though I did regret it, which means he regretted sin in it, but now it's turned out worthwhile, and he does not regret it. For in verse 10 it says, for godly sorrow produces repentance, leading to salvation. So we find the joy that Paul finds from the results that Titus brings him. And in fact, he ends the chapter with, therefore I rejoice that I have confidence in you in everything. So Paul is in a big turnaround. It brings joy to him and comfort to him of how the Corinthians have repented and in turn to God. And so enjoy your lesson today and study it and read about the joy that Paul finds from it after all of his concern with the Corinthians and his love for the Corinthians. May you have a blessed day. God bless you.